News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM. This is KFYO Mornings. Dave King and Matt Martin here on your radio. And as promised, we have Congressman Jodey Arrington on the line this morning. Good morning, Congressman.
Hey, good morning, Dave, Matt. Good to be with you guys.
Are you in Washington this morning?
I am in Washington and en route back to West Texas. So I've been there for the last week with a Wounded Warrior, West Texas Wounded Warrior project that at some point I'd love to talk about, but would just honor the fallen soldiers post 9/11 who graduated from West Texas high schools in my district. It's a way to make sure that we have a culture among our students that values our military and that understands that freedom comes at a great cost. And it's been amazing, and we just recognized and honored two fallen heroes, Jeff Johnson and Mark Cannon from Coronado High School. It was a packed auditorium, and it was just a great patriotic event, and it was quintessential West Texas.
Yeah. Well, are you going to be able to meet with our honor flight that's going to be there? Well, I'm not sure. In the next week or two.
Yes, I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't miss it. That was one of my favorite events since being up here with last year's honor flight. We went to the floor of the House and talked about our country and listened to those guys inspire me and others with their stories. So you bet.
Well, I'm telling you, that's one of the greatest programs that I've ever been involved in, and I have never heard one old soldier, who didn't come back and say that it was the trip of a lifetime. And a big part of that, Congressman, is you and the previous congressman who met with them and toured them through the Capitol. They thought so much of that. Well,
it's an honor, as you can imagine, beyond words, and so I wish we could do more, but just looking at these guys, I mean, World War II, Korean War, all the various theaters and eras in our armed services, and these guys deserve the very best at a minimum to see these monuments erected for heroes like them. And so glad to be a small part.
That is very true. Well, I'm glad we got that mentioned, but also, I mean, the thing that is pressing on our minds is what transpired over the last week or so in Washington, D.C. And we read, or I have just read your statement about what transpired and how glad you are that Judge Cavanaugh is confirmed. And also, as I understand it, his wife is from Abilene, which is which is in your district, huh?
She is. I've been communicating with her because I feel so badly about all that she and Brett have had to endure in this process. Although I'm so proud of them for staying with it and not being intimidated by all this baloney and swampiness, because they have nothing to be ashamed of. He's been a great judge. He's had an impeccable record as an appellate judge. He's got unimpeachable character, and she's a West Texan, so she's good people. And but most importantly, I think, and above all, we're going to move that balance of power definitively in the position of constitutional conservative, which means people will the Supreme Court will make decisions based on the Constitution and rule of law, not some political or policy agenda. That's as it should be, and that's what our founders expected.
Yeah. Well, as I sat and watched this transpire on television over the last week and saw the length at which the Democrats went to trash this man, can you explain to me what I was witnessing? Because I came out of that deal feeling like this isn't the America that I live in anymore. I was profoundly affected negatively by it.
Well, it was. I think all of us were. We couldn't believe our eyes that we were watching the level of personal attacks like we saw levied on Brett Kavanaugh and his family, and that we saw the doctrines, time-honored doctrines, foundational doctrines of due process and presumption of innocence just thrown aside willy-nilly because it was sort of the end justified the means by the resistance and obstruction of the Democrats. And it reached an all-time low for sure. But here's the upside. The positive side is twofold. One is we didn't give in. The president didn't. Brett Kavanaugh didn't, and the Republicans ultimately didn't, including, I'd say, Joe Manchin. But because had we acquiesced, and we would have rewarded this kind of behavior, and we would have seen this be the norm in politics and our political culture in our country, and it would have been disastrous. So I think justice prevailed and goodness and righteousness prevailed at the end of the day. And I'm proud of this president because he promised that he would put constitutionalist qualified judges on the bench, and we all knew that was the big sort of generational impact decision that he would have in this first term and then on in probably to the second term. Promise made, promise delivered. Probably a weaker president would have acquiesced and pulled the nomination. He didn't, and we've now got a 5-4 court in support of the Constitution and rule of law as a result.
Now, Congressman, one thing that I am a little worried about is, the voters now have a choice, and they're going to have to decide whether they're willing to put up with this from the Democrats. I mean, it was obviously, like you said, you don't want them to be rewarded, but now the voters are going to have to go out and make sure they're not rewarded at the ballot box.
Yeah, that's right, Matt. And look, the Democrats' strategy of obstruction and resistance and attacks and more Washington swampiness is not going to be lost on the voters. I think the moderate Republican, Democrats, and independents, those guys in the middle, they've got good sense. They've got good judgment. I think the Democrats underestimate their discernment and judgment. I don't think it's escaped them what's going on. And at the end of the day, even if they don't like President Trump's style, they respect the results that we're getting with this, all-time low unemployment, or since 1969, this growth, the strength, the freedoms, the protections, the security, all these things that, fair trade deals. I mean, we're not even talking about that because the Supreme Court's taken most of the oxygen out of the room. But, man, we've settled an new and improved NAFTA that's going to help workers, manufacturers, and producers in this country. Another promise made, promise kept. The results are undeniable, and I think people are going to say, my life's better. I'm going to stick with the team that's on the field right now.
Congressman, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll have a longer segment.
You got it.
Okay. I'm back with Congressman Arrington after this. And we're back on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin, and we want to get Congressman Jodey Arrington back on with us this morning.
Now, Congressman, I had a quick question, just because this still had to do kind of with the Cavanaugh stuff. Is you had Sheila Jackson Lee had I guess they're now saying he was a fellow that was paid by an outside institution that released information about some of the senators. How normal is it for congressmen to have people paid from outside institutions working for them?
Well, I think you got people. I think it's common practice. I mean, you have think tanks that have educational programs. You've got universities. I mean, Texas Tech has one of the biggest internship sort of fellow type program. The VA. I could go on and on. I think it's a normal thing, and it's up to the members to decide who they want to bring on based on the organization's background and the individual and their specific contribution to your office. But ultimately, it's a great experience for them, and it helps us support the operations of these members. So I don't have any problem with it.
So normally, someone that's a fellow, is it public information who they work for?
It should be.
Okay, this guy, we still don't know who he worked for, right? Jackson.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with it to be frank. Okay. So I don't know, but yeah, it should be it should be disclosed publicly. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead. Let's move on to the Farm Bill. I don't know that we're going to see anything before the election, but is there anything new about the Farm Bill coming out?
Well, just that Senator Debbie Stabenow, for example, now wants to fight with us on Title I, not just on the food stamp reforms that we've talked about. She wants rooftop and window gardening to be part of the food infrastructure, just to show you how ridiculous this is. The food infrastructure to support ag independence in this country was not set up for rooftop gardening, and now that's how the Democrats want to approach the Farm Bill. We've made some headway on some things like rural development, on broadband technology infrastructure investment, things that are important because you got to have sustainable rural communities to have viable agriculture. But yeah, they want to wait, and they want to see how this election turns out to see if it's in their favor. It's unfortunate, but they've allowed politics to bog down the getting a Farm Bill through.
Well, Congressman, where are we on this? I know early, and it's been probably a year or more ago, there was an idea floated that instead of providing people with food stamps, they would send them meals in a box. And I forget the name of this company that does that. It's Blue Apron or something like that, and they'll send you complete meals in a box. Is that going to go anywhere?
No, that won't go anywhere. I'm just going to tell you that I think that this is how the program started, though, Dave. It was a commodity-based program. So surplus commodities were distributed to people who were living under poverty. But there probably is a more efficient way to do it now. I think there's more fraught with abuse and with fraud. But I don't think that's an issue that we're going to win the day on. But what we at least ought to do is to say the monies that are spent ought to go to nutritional items,
right?
Not items that contribute to obesity, where we have to pay out on the other side in Medicaid. And we ought to require people who are able-bodied to work in order to receive any government assistance. Again, if you're work capable, you ought to work to receive government assistance. That's the American way.
That's going to go nowhere with the Democrats, though, isn't it?
At this point, they show no signs of movement on that. But again, the national media hasn't given us any time on the air to put pressure on them because it's an embarrassing position, and they don't want us to be talking about something that 80% of the American people, both Republican and Democrat, support, and that's restoring a work ethic in this country. So, yeah, it's been very difficult, and we're not getting any help from the mainstream media.
All right, Congressman, we have about 1 minute left. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we haven't brought up yet?
I just want to say we've got freer markets with lower tax and regulatory burden. We're seeing the results of that in spades. We've got a fairer trade deal. This is what the president ran on, and it's a promise made, promise kept. We've got constitutionalist judges that won't have a political or policy agenda. They'll just go straight down the road on rule of law and the Constitution. Not to mention stronger security, the largest down payment to rebuild the military so that we can keep our country safe and protect our liberties. So I'd say that at the end of the day, I hope folks recognize whether they think the president's style they are favorable or not, the results of this president and this unified Republican leadership in Washington has proven to advance this country to safer, stronger, freer grounds.